They say the dead should rest in peace, but Elmer McCurdy didn't get that luxury. After a botched train robbery and a bullet to the chest, his story should have ended in 1911. Instead, his body became a sideshow attraction, passed from hand to hand, mistaken for a prop, and forgotten for over half a century. This is the story of a failed outlaw whose corpse had a more successful career than he ever did alive. Stay tuned because stuff's about to get weird. Elmer J. McCurdy was born on New Year's Day, 1880, in Washington, Maine. His mother, Sadie McCurdy, was just 17 years old, unmarried, and already facing the sharp judgment of a society that didn't take kindly to a woman having children out of wedlock. Whispers surrounded the baby's paternity. Though it was never confirmed, many believed Elmer's father was Sadie's own cousin, Charles Smith, a name Elmer himself would later adopt as an alias. To shield both Sadie and her newborn son from the harsh glare of public opinion, Sadie's brother George and his wife Helen stepped in. They raised Elmer as their own, creating a quiet fiction meant to spare the family from shame. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever. Not much is known about Elmer's childhood, but in 1890, when he was just 10 years old, the man he believed to be his father, his uncle George, died of tuberculosis. After George's death, the family made a move. Sadie and Helen relocated with young Elmer to Bangor, Maine. Maybe they were looking for new opportunities, or maybe it was just too painful to stay in the same place without George. It's worth noting, Sadie stayed close. Even after all those years, she remained an active part of her son's life, a quiet, constant presence in a life already full of secrets. At some point, Sadie told Elmer the truth, that she wasn't his aunt, but his mother. That the people he thought were his parents weren't. And just like that, the ground shifted beneath his feet. Imagine being a teenager and realizing your whole life was built on a lie, not out of malice, but out of shame. Elmer didn't take it well. Who would? Angry, betrayed, lost, he lashed out the only way he knew how, with a bottle in his hand. What started as a way to drown the hurt quickly became a full-blown addiction, one he would never shake. For a brief moment, it looked like Elmer McCurdy might finally be turning a corner. He'd moved in with his grandfather and started working as a plumber's apprentice. Steady work, a roof over his head, maybe even a shot at a real future. But the moment of stability didn't last. The economy took a turn, and Elmer lost his job. Then, Sadie, the complicated loving force in his life, died from a ruptured ulcer. And just 2 months after that, his grandfather passed too, taking the last of Elmer's support system with him. One blow after another. Just when he'd started to pull himself together, the world came crashing down again. In need of a fresh start, the 20-year-old Elmer left Maine behind. Over the next few years, he drifted across the eastern U.S., picking up work in lead mines and plumbing jobs wherever he could. But alcoholism has a way of derailing things, especially steady work. And Elmer couldn't seem to hold on to any job or any place for long. With each new stop, he edged farther west. By 1905, he had landed in Iola, Kansas, and landed himself in jail for public intoxication. No surprise there. Probably feeling less than welcome after that, Elmer packed up and moved again, this time to Webb City, Missouri. In 1907, still living in Webb City, Elmer decided to try and straighten himself out by joining the Army. He was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, where he trained as a machine gun operator and learned the basics of using nitroglycerin for demolition. The very basics, as it turns out, and that'll matter later. Elmer served for 3 years before receiving an honorable discharge on November 7th, 1910. Though honestly, honorable might be stretching it. Less than 2 weeks after he got out, on November 19th, Elmer and an army buddy were arrested for possession of burglary tools: chisels, hacksaws, nitroglycerin funnels, gunpowder, and empty sacks ready to be filled with loot. When they stood before a judge, they claimed the tools were for building something, a foot-operated machine gun they were allegedly inventing. The judge wasn't impressed, but somehow the jury at their January 1911 trial was. Elmer was found not guilty. And he took that lucky break as a sign. Emboldened by his court win, Elmer McCurdy stepped out of the county jail and straight into a brand new career, robbing banks and trains. Remember that army training? Well, it didn't exactly pay off. Elmer tried to use nitroglycerin in a number of his robberies, but either he wasn't paying attention during demolition class, or the army gave him the worst crash course imaginable, because his explosions rarely went according to plan. Take his March 1911 train robbery. The job was supposed to bring in $4,000. Elmer and his crew stopped the train just fine. But when it came time to crack open the safe, Elmer went a little heavy on the nitroglycerin. Instead of blowing the door off, he blew the entire thing to pieces, along with most of the money inside. What was left? A few $100s worth of melted silver coins. Some of them fused right to the twisted remains of the safe. It was less like a heist, more like a scene out of a slapstick comedy. Not one to admit defeat, Elmer spent the next 6 months regrouping, plotting his next big score. By September, he had set his sights on the Citizens Bank in Chautauqua, Kansas. The plan? Break in through the back wall with a hammer. And somehow, no one heard 2 hours of pounding. Maybe the town slept heavy, or maybe luck was finally on Elmer's side. Once inside, though, it was déjà vu. Elmer prepped the vault door for demolition, and once again, overdid it. The blast was so strong, it launched the outer vault door clean across the bank, leaving massive structural damage in its wake. But the safe inside, the one with the real money, untouched. Worse still, when Elmer tried to set off a second round of nitro, it didn't even ignite. Admitting defeat, again, the crew scraped together about $150 in loose coins that had been outside the safe and quietly slipped into the night. Another job, another spectacular failure. Elmer's post-heist life was anything but glamorous. He spent the next few weeks holed up in a friend's hayshed, drinking away the bitter taste of yet another botched job. Finally, on October 4th, 1911, Elmer set his sights on the big one. A train rumored to be carrying $400,000 in cash. Enough to set him up for life. This was it. No more haylofts, no more nickel and dime disasters. He was going all in. Let's pause right here and take bets. How do you think this one went? Tap that like button and drop your guess in the comments. I'll be reading and replying, especially if you call it right. If you guessed they stopped the wrong train entirely, Congratulations, you win 1,000 crumbs. Their heist of a lifetime netted them just $46. 2 bottles of whiskey, which Elmer was probably thrilled about, a revolver, a coat, and the poor conductor's watch. One newspaper dubbed it one of the smallest in the history of train robbery. Honestly, fair enough. Disappointed in himself yet again, Elmer slunk back to his friend's hayshed and cracked open the stolen whiskey, drowning his shame as usual. And unsurprisingly, that turned out to be a terrible plan, because the booze made him loose-lipped enough to spill the whole story to a few nearby ranch hands. Then he staggered up to the hayloft to sleep it off. Problem was, even though he only managed to snag $46, robbing a train was still a serious crime. And that must have been some high-quality whiskey, because by morning, a $2,000 reward had already put a target on his back. And when Elmer woke up the next day, his hideout was surrounded by 3 deputy sheriffs and a pack of bloodhounds. After an hour-long shootout, Elmer McCurdy was finally dead, taken down by a single bullet to the chest. What were these people? Stormtroopers? An hour of gunfire and only 1 bullet found its mark. Then again, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Nobody came to claim Elmer's body. So the undertaker, Joseph L. Johnson, did what any enterprising mortician might do in 1911. He embalmed it with a special preservative meant to keep bodies intact for extended periods, just in case next of kin did show up. But no one did. And Johnson wasn't about to bury a man for free. So he stashed Elmer in the back of his funeral home, a sort of mummified hostage, held until his debts were paid. When weeks turned into months, Johnson got creative. If no one was going to pay for Elmer, maybe Elmer could start earning his keep. So the undertaker put the preserved corpse on display and started charging admission. Because of course he did. Obviously. The undertaker dressed Elmer in everyday clothes, propped a rifle in his hands, and stood him upright in a corner of the funeral home. For just a nickel, curious visitors could get a peek at the bandit who wouldn't give up. What a bargain! I mean, who wouldn't pay 5 cents to gawk at a real dead outlaw turned room decoration? And as ridiculous as it sounds, people loved it. They came in droves, dropped their nickels, and filed past the embalmed outlaw like it was some kind of grim Americana attraction. Though, I have to wonder, did people rub his nose for luck? Probably not. Elmer's luck was famously terrible. Plenty of folks tried to buy Elmer's corpse, but Johnson wouldn't sell. He knew exactly what he had, a mummified cash cow. But then, in 1916, salvation seemed to arrive. 2 men walked into the funeral home claiming to be Elmer's brothers, Aver and Wayne McCurdy. They said they had come to take their poor, wayward sibling home to San Francisco for a proper burial. A tearful goodbye, a final resting place, closure. Mr. Johnson bought the whole act. He handed over the body, and the brothers shipped Elmer off by train, but not to any cemetery, because Aver and Wayne weren't Elmer's brothers at all. They were James and Charles Patterson, a couple of Carnival grifters looking for a new star attraction. And Elmer McCurdy, with his waxy skin and bullet hole chest, was just the ticket. Before long, the bandit who wouldn't give up was back on the road, not in a hearse, but as a sideshow act in the Great Paterson Carnival shows. The man had failed at robbing trains, but in death, he was the main event. Elmer's next gig came courtesy of a man named Louis Sonny, who had a different kind of traveling show, one he called the Museum of Crime. It was a chilling little exhibit filled with wax replicas of infamous outlaws and gangsters. Pretty standard fare, until Sonny added something real. Elmer, the only actual corpse among the mannequins. It's hard to say whether audiences realized they were staring at a mummified man, or if they just thought the exhibit's McCurdy figure was unusually lifelike. Either way, Elmer fit right in, a genuine outlaw among the fakes. Over the next couple of decades, Elmer changed hands a few more times, bouncing between exhibits in 1928 and again in 1933. But he always ended up back under Sonny's control. That is, until 1949, when Louis Sonny died. After a nearly 40-year post-mortem career, Elmer finally got a little rest in a Los Angeles warehouse. It wasn't exactly a peaceful afterlife, but at least no one was poking him for nickels. That break didn't last long, though. In 1964, Louis Sonny's son, Dan, loaned Elmer's body to a filmmaker, David F. Friedman, for a role in the exploitation flick She Freak. Yes, after decades of bank robbing, carnival touring, and being mistaken for wax, Elmer McCurdy was now a movie star. When filming wrapped, he was returned to storage like a retired prop, which, to be fair, is how most people saw him by now. Then, in 1968, Dan Sonny sold Elmer, along with some wax figures, to Spoonie Singh, the eccentric owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum, for $10,000. Spoonie added Elmer to an exhibit near Mount Rushmore. And that's when things really went sideways. A windstorm rolled through and blew off parts of him. The tips of his ears, some fingers, and toes were gone, scattered somewhere in South Dakota, never to be seen again. Spoonie took one look and decided the body was now too gruesome for display, which is saying something considering he knew it was a corpse. And he declared that the one real body in his collection just didn't look lifelike enough anymore. So he sold Elmer yet again. This time to the owner of an amusement park in Long Beach, California, called The Pike. So Elmer ended up in the last place anyone might expect, dangling from the ceiling of a rundown funhouse at the Pike Amusement Park. A real corpse mistaken for a cheap Halloween prop. A dead man pretending to be a fake dead man. And there he hung, quietly deteriorating under flashing lights and screaming laughter. Until December 8th, 1976. It should have been just another prop. The crew of the $6 Million Man was filming an episode called Carnival of Spies inside a dilapidated funhouse, because of course they were. A prop guy reached up to move the creepy mannequin dangling from the gallows. You know, casual set dressing. But when he grabbed the arm, it snapped off. And instead of foam or stuffing, he saw bone and dried flesh. The horrifying truth hit all at once. This wasn't a dummy. It was a corpse. Police were called immediately, and the next day a coroner named Dr. Joseph Choi performed the autopsy. The autopsy results read like the plot of a horror comedy. First, the obvious. The body belonged to a man who had been shot in the chest. The bullet jacket still lodged inside him, was an early 20th century type, helping pinpoint his time of death. Combine that with traces of arsenic, a preservative phased out in the 1920s, and the coroner could confirm this man had been dead for a long time. Over the decades, his skin had been coated in layers of wax and paint, like someone trying to preserve a Halloween prop on a budget. His ears were missing. His big toes, gone. A few fingers, also MIA. He was less corpse, more DIY project at this point. But the strangest discovery came when the coroner removed the lower jaw to check his teeth. Inside his mouth, Dr. Choi found a 1924 penny and ticket stubs to Louis Sonny's Museum of Crime. Elmer McCurdy hadn't just been a roadside attraction. He'd been painted, strung up, hauled across the country, and mistaken for a prop so many times he practically was one. But finding a 1924 penny and a couple of Carnival ticket stubs inside his mouth? That was a new low. At some point, someone had literally treated Elmer's corpse like a piggy bank. The ticket stubs jammed in Elmer's mouth led investigators to Dan Sonny, who was probably shocked that McCurdy hadn't decomposed, retired, or unionized after all these years. Dan confirmed the corpse's identity, which was later verified through a process called superimposition. Basically, they took radiographs of Elmer's skull and overlaid them on a known photo of him. The match was clear. This traveling sideshow prop really was Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy was finally laid to rest on April 22nd, 1977, in Summit View Cemetery in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And just to be extra sure no one tried to drag him back into showbiz, they poured 2 solid feet of concrete over his casket. The historic equivalent of saying no sequels. Seriously, can we let the man rest now? If anyone has earned a proper rest, it's Elmer McCurdy. If this story blew your mind like one of Elmer's safes, smash that like button, subscribe for more strange forgotten history, and drop a comment with your favorite ridiculous moment, or tell me who you think deserves the spotlight next. Because let's be real, history is full of people who got done dirty, and I'm just getting started. See you in the next one, and may your posthumous career be slightly less dramatic than Elmer's. Thanks, everyone.